With football season upon us now, there's a lot happening in the news, so be sure to subscribe to my other channel, JG9 News, where I give you up-to-the-minute updates on everything happening in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, and I give my thoughts on everything taking place around the National Football League today. And now, on with our feature presentation. There are many things to be excited about when a season comes to an end and we hit the final week of the year. Of course, on the team side, there's the obvious story regarding the playoff hunt. During the final week of the season, so many teams are fighting for their playoff lives. A win gets them the division, and it gets them the chance to host a playoff game, while a loss relegates them to a wild card, and their road gets significantly tougher to get to the Super Bowl. Or a win gets them into the playoffs, while a loss keeps them out and puts them on their couch, watching the postseason from the comfort of their own living room, or I guess the discomfort if they're eaten alive at the fact that they didn't make it into the field. But there's also a fun element during the final week from an individual perspective, and that is the element of contract bonuses. You've probably seen some players celebrate a routine catch or a routine sack in the final week of the season way more than usual, and that's because they know that with that play, they just got paid. Many players, in fact, just about every player, has some sort of incentive clause in their contract that gives them a pay raise if they hit certain statistical milestones throughout the season. Catch 70 passes, and you get an extra $500,000. Get 10 sacks, you get an extra $1 million. Run for over 1,000 yards, here's $400,000 your way. You get the idea. These are incredibly common, and just about every year, you'll see players hitting these marks during the final week of the season and getting a nice, hefty payday in the process to make their wallets a little bit fatter. But the story that we're going to talk about today, involving the man you've been watching this whole time, is quite possibly the craziest instance of that. The story we're going to dissect today involves a man who had an almost impossible clause in his contract and was on the verge of hitting it. Some last week dramatics would decide whether a player who wasn't making a ton of money as it stood was going to walk away with a pretty hefty sum of cash, especially considering the time period and especially considering the surrounding circumstances. Because this man right here, the man you've been watching, is Carl Birdsong, and entering the final week of the strike-shortened 1982 season, he was on a mission to get a $5,000 bonus. And what followed was more dramatic than the actual game itself, and was an insane roller coaster of a quest that should not have been possible, and probably should not have even happened, but ended up living on in NFL history more than 4 decades later. Because this is the story behind a punter and his bizarre quest to get a $5,000 bonus. The 1982 season was a very good season for the St. Louis Cardinals. It's safe to say that the team had fallen on hard times in recent years, having not made the playoffs since the 1975 season, and having finished with a losing record in each of the past 5 seasons. The Bud Wilkinson experiment was a failure. The team was drafting pusts in the first round at an alarming rate, to the point where every first-round pick they touched went to crap, and the Cards were consistently at the bottom of the ultra-competitive NFC East. However, everything changed in 1982 in Jim Hadafin's 3rd year as the man in charge, as 8 weeks into the strike-shortened season, the Cardinals found themselves at 5-3, having clinched a playoff spot and having guaranteed the fact that they were going to play in the Super Bowl tournament. There were quite a few reasons for the Cardinals making it back to the playoffs for the first time in nearly a decade. They had a very solid defense on paper, as the team had allowed just 142 points through the first 8 games, or just over 17 points per game. This was the 4th best total in the NFC. They had a clutch factor that could not be taught, as they had multiple games where they won it on the last-second field goal or a last-second touchdown. It seemed like as long as the Cards were in it by the end of the game, they were going to do something special. It was very Cardiac Cards-esque. Plus, when you've got Otis Anderson at running back, and you've got a defensive line led by Curtis Greer, who finished the year averaging nearly 1 sack per game and finishing 6th in the league in sacks that season, It's not hard to see why the Cards were able to have some success during this bizarre season. However, you cannot overlook the special teams unit. You cannot overlook the third phase of the game. And if there was any reason in particular why the Cardinals were successful in 1982, it was the play of this man right here, their punter, Carl Birdsong. St. Louis finished the season ranked 25th in the league in points scored out of 28 teams, and they ranked 23rd in total offensive yardage. So when your offense is struggling, you need a punter who can flip the field. You really need a guy like that. And Carl Birdsong was that guy. Birdsong spent the 1981 season with the Cardinals as an undrafted free agent out of Southwest Oklahoma State, and he played well his first year there. He got over 26% of his punts to land inside the 20, which was the 6th best average in the league. He averaged 41.8 yards per punt, which was 9th in the league. From a net yardage standpoint, he averaged 35.5 net yards per punt, which was 8th in the league. Carl Birdsong was a top 10 punter, and Carl Birdsong was really solid as a rookie. But in 1982, oh man, he was on a completely different level, because 8 games into the season, you were looking at one of the best punters in football, if not the best punter in football. Carl Birdsong averaged 44.36 yards per punt through the first 8 games of 1982, which, right off the bat, sounds great, especially for that era, especially when you bring up the fact that Birdsong led the entire NFC in yards per punt. He must be doing something right. But if you dive deeper, you realize just how special Carl Birdsong was, and why, however good you think he was so much better than that in actuality. To give you some perspective on how good his numbers were through the first 8 games at 44.36 yards per punt, to average over 44 yards per punt back in 1982 meant that you were really good, because it was extremely rare for a punter to do that. The average punt was a hair under 41 yards back in 1982. So to be at 44 yards, you needed to be 3 yards above the league-wide average, which is no small feat. If you want a percentage comparison, the difference between 40.9 yards, which was the league-wide average, and 44 yards is 7.6%. This means that if we're looking at this from a 2024 lens, for a punter to be that far above the league-wide average, they would need to average 50.9 yards per punt. So now, you have an idea of how insane that is for the era. During the 1981 season, Pat McInally was named an AP First-Team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler with the Cincinnati Bengals. He was, quite literally, the only punter in the NFL to average at least 44 yards per punt. In 1980, Dave Jennings was named an AP First-Team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler with the New York Giants. He was, quite literally, the only punter in the NFL to average at least 44 yards per punt. How rare was it to average at least 44 yards per punt? Well, from 1974 to 81, in that 8-year stretch, the 2 guys I mentioned, Pat McInally and Dave Jennings, were the only 2 punters to have a season at 44 yards or better. Bottom line, if you could hit that 44-yard plateau, you weren't just really good. You were having one of the best seasons by any punter ever in terms of how strong your leg was, because numbers like that were nearly unheard of. And fortunately for Birdsong, there was a nice bonus in his contract that would reward him quite handsomely if he kept up this incredible pace of his and hit that 44-yard mark, which he was at by this point in the year. If he could finish the season averaging at least 44 yards per punt, then he'd be getting $5,000. Knowing NFL history and knowing what we know about Cards ownership, the Cards clearly put that clause in there thinking that there was no chance he could actually hit it. But with 1 game to go, it was a legitimate possibility. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind with this $5,000 bonus. Number 1, you might be thinking to yourself, $5,000 is absolutely nothing. I mean, it's a fair amount of money to the average person, but to an NFL player? Well, $5,000 is chump change. However, this was not the case back then. For one, $5,000 in 1982 came out to over $16,000 in today's money. So think of it like that. An extra 5 figures, no matter who you are, definitely can't hurt. I'll put it that way. But number 2, remember, This was 1982 that we were talking about. There was a 2-month period where the players were not getting paid because they were on strike. We just had a cancellation of 2 whole months of the season where no one was getting paid and where many players were extremely tight with their finances. There were quite a few stories from the 1982 season of players who were flat out broke because their spouses gave birth during the strike, their spouse was a stay-at-home mom, and as the primary income provider, they were getting nothing. If there was a year where a little change could go a long way, if there was ever a year where this mattered, it was the 1982 season. And number 3, it's not as though NFL players were making a lot of money back then as it was. Football was big, and the NFL was the biggest league in America. But the finances were not where they are today, where everyone's making 6 figures minimum, and where if you're a good punter, you're getting a multi-million-dollar contract. That just wasn't happening 40 years ago. The St. Louis Cardinals were already one of the cheapest teams in football, as during the 1982 season, the average salary of guys on the roster was just over $85,000. On average across the NFL, punters made $65,376, so they made way less than that. And remember, this was the average salary. We don't know what exactly Birdsong made, but remember, this was a guy in his 2nd season in the league who was an undrafted free agent. So we can assume, knowing the average salary of punters, and knowing that the Cardinals had a below-average payroll as it was, that Carl Birdsong made way less than $65,000. I think the best comparison to see what Birdsong made in 1982 comes from Kansas City Chiefs punter Jeff Gossett. The Chiefs and Cardinals had very similar salaries, and Gossett, much like Birdsong, was a 2nd-year punter who was an undrafted free agent. So it's a very similar situation. In 1982, Jeff Gossett made $40,000. That's it. $40K. So yeah, a $5,000 bonus when you're making $40,000 is a freaking big deal. Heck, you might be watching this video right now, and you might be making $40,000 a year at your job. And if your boss offered you a $5,000 bonus, you would think that this was a big deal. And for Carl Birdsong, it's no different. With all that in mind, to say that there was an incentive to average 44 yards per punt would be putting it lightly. Yet, that's what Birdsong was dealing with here. 1 game to go, and he was at 44.36 yards per punt. 1 game to go, and he was in line for that payday. And now, we head to this game right here, the final game of the regular season. It's January 2nd, 1983. It's week 9 of the season, or week 17 if you want to look at it like that. And we've got a battle on our hands at RFK Stadium between 2 teams that would usually be divisional rivals, but because there are no divisions in 1982, they're just conference foes. It's a battle between St. Louis and Washington. For the main team in our story, the Cardinals, this one is a massive one for a few reasons. From a team perspective, the Cards entered with that 5-3 record. Yes, they had already clinched a playoff spot by this point, as they were 2 up on the 9th best team with 1 game to play. However, if they won this game, then they would clinch a home playoff game for the first time since moving to St. Louis, and they would play their first playoff game at home since the 1947 NFL Championship, back when they were in Chicago and over 35 years ago. Lose this game, and while you still make the playoffs, and you still finish the season with a winning record for the first time since 1976, you will be going on the road for your first round game, and you'll be starting off the Super Bowl tournament behind the 8 ball. But more importantly, for the purposes of our story, this game was massive for this man right here, punter Carl Birdsong, because the stakes for this one were incredibly clear. He entered the game averaging 44.36 yards per punt. Just stay above that 44-yard line. If you can stay above that line and just punt the way that you've been punting all season, that $5,000 bonus is yours. Just do what you've been doing, and you get a nice, hefty paycheck. You cap your season off with a bang, and your wallet gets a little bit fatter. You know what you have to do. As for what happened next, well, while the game itself didn't produce any dramatics whatsoever, this game still turned out to be one of the most thrilling of the entire season if you knew the backstory behind it. Because what followed next was the dramatic quest for a $5,000 paycheck. Before going any further, there's one other thing that we need to note about this man right here. There's one easy way for him to get that $5,000 bonus and get that substantial raise. And that is if he doesn't have to punt the ball. He's above the 44-yard mark, and he's already got a pretty large sample size of punts. So 1 or 2 punts won't fluctuate the number a whole lot. The last time these teams met earlier this season, Carl Birdsong only had to punt the ball twice. Even if you average 40 yards per punt across those 2 punts, that's not going to be enough to deny you the bonus. It's like in baseball when a player has the batting title won, and they sit out the final game so they can win the title. The easiest way to do something is by not being called on to do it in the first place. 2 things need to happen in this game for Carl Birdsong to be denied his bonus. He needs to have an off day, and he has to punt the ball a lot. I'm talking way more than usual. He's averaging about 5 yards per punt so far in the season, per game. And his worst game from an average standpoint was 40.5 yards per punt. If that happens, he still gets his 44 yards per punt and would get his bonus. What I'm trying to get at here is it would take a bad performance by Birdsong's standards and a catastrophically bad performance by the Cardinals offense, which was already a bad offense, thereby forcing him to punt the ball a ton in order for Birdsong to be denied his $5,000 bonus. There's no way that can possibly happen, right? Carl Birdsong is going to get his $5,000 by the end of the day. No doubt about it. Right? Well, Birdsong sees the field way quicker than anyone would have liked, as after the Cardinals start the game off with the ball, they go absolutely nowhere. 2 runs by Otis Anderson get stuffed, and a 3rd down pass on a drag route comes nowhere close to picking up the requisite yardage for the first down. So it's a quick 3 and out. Time for Birdsong's first punt of the game. And this one, well, he's had better punts, I'll put it that way. Not a lot of hang time or distance on this one, as this one travels just 37 yards, going from St. Louis's 25-yard line to Washington's 38-yard line. Not a great punt by any means, but hey, he's still okay. If we do the math after this punt, and we'll have a running tally for you at the top right corner of the screen, he's got 1,989 punting yards this season and 45 punts. So even though that punt brought down his average, he's still sitting at 44.2 yards per punt. If he never punts again, he's got his bonus. But based on how the Cards offense looked on that first drive, and the whole season for that matter, you have this feeling in your heart that he's going to get a ton more chances to punt it away, which is not good. The more chances he has, the more chances he has to go below that 44-yard mark. But so far, we're okay. After St. Louis gets a stop defensively, maybe they can get a good drive going on offense to keep Birdsong off the field. But once again, the Cardinals are unable to muster up a first down. After Neil Lomax's pass on first down falls incomplete, following a huge hit by Jarris White, 2 runs, including a run on 3rd and 7 for some reason, go absolutely nowhere, meaning that the Cardinals, once again, go 3 and out and are forced to punt. Carl Birdsong only had to punt the ball twice the first time these teams met. We're not even midway through the first quarter, and he's already equaled that total. On this punt, Birdsong is not helped out by a low snap, as his long snapper did him dirty here. It's not a bad punt considering those circumstances, but it's well below that 44-yard average, as the punt goes from the St. Louis 31 to the Washington 30, so a 39-yard punt. Better than the last one, and way more hang time, but that is going to lower the average a tad. The good news is that 2 punts into the game, and we are still doing all right in terms of being at that 44-yard mark. If Birdsong never sees the field again, he's got his $5,000 bonus. The bad news is that at 46 punts for 2,028 yards, his average is starting to dip a little bit, as we're at 44.09 yards per punt. Still okay, but there is some work to do. And spoiler alert, this was not Birdsong's final punt of the game. Far from it. St. Louis forces another stop defensively, and after the Cardinals get nothing going on their first two plays, they're faced with third and medium, still looking for their first down of the game. The bad news is that this is a horrible snap by Dan Dierdorf, floating by Neil Lomax, and being picked up by Dexter Manley on the other team. The good news is that, in a sad, twisted way, this actually helps Carl Birdsong. For all intents and purposes, when it comes to the $5,000, turnovers are just as good as touchdowns. It doesn't really matter how it happens. Any drive where Carl Birdsong does not see the field is a good, productive one when it comes to preserving the $5,000 bonus. Bad break for the Cardinals, but good break for Carl Birdsong. However, he would not be so fortunate on St. Louis's next drive, when after 2 runs set up 3rd and 3, Neil Lomax overshoots a wide-open Greg LaFleur in the flat. 4 drives into the game, and the Cardinals have still not picked up a first down. Whereas Carl Birdsong didn't have to punt on the last drive, he does have to punt this one away from his own 17-yard line. As for this punt, he's had way better ones, I know that much. Rough game so far. A line drive with no hang time whatsoever and not a lot of distance ends up getting fielded at Washington's 45-yard line, so it's only a 38-yard punt. All 3 punts for Birdsong have been less than 40 yards, and his average is dipping and dipping by the punt. We're now 3 punts into the game, and just like that, Carl Birdsong's average on the season has gone from 44.36 yards per punt to 43.94. He's below the line. 3 punts in, and he's below the line. Now, if he gets to 43.95, they will round up, but as things stand, for the first time, Carl Birdsong's bonus is in danger. For the first time, Carl Birdsong wants to see the field. At this point, seeing the field is the only way for him to get his money. The tides have turned, and he'll get plenty more chances to do that. I can tell you that much. The Cardinals start their next drive on their own 14-yard line down 14-0. And Jesus Christ, Lomax, what the heck are you doing? Yeah, just run backwards and keep backpedaling when the play is dead instead of living to fight another day. Make it tougher for Birdsong to get his $5,000 bonus, why don't you? Shocker, the Cardinals, for the 5th straight drive, do not pick up a first down. Even though they do get some breathing room on 3rd down, Carl Birdsong, who needs to improve his average by a hair, now has to do so with not a lot of space, being pinned back in his own end zone with the ball at the 9-yard line. And this punt? Not pretty. It's really not pretty. At least it took a favorable bounce, but it was still a crappy punt that lets Washington start their next drive past midfield. 4 punts into this one, and all 4 haven't even so much as gone 40 yards, with that one being just a 38-yard punt. The best punter in the NFC has seemingly forgotten how to punt the ball away, as the average has gone down once again to 43.81. Now, we seriously have some work to do. At least with the way the Cards' offense is playing, Carl Birdsong is going to have plenty more chances to get that average back up. Because on drive number 6, you guessed it, the Cardinals went 3 and out. 2 plays went nowhere, and then Neil Lomax threw a pretty good pass that went off the hands of his receiver, Mike Schumann. So the Cardinals were forced to punt it once again from their own 22-yard line. This scheme is a disaster for the Cards. They can't move the ball, and they can't flip the field because everyone, including their punter of all people, the top punter in the NFC, is having an off day. Go figure. But maybe punt number 5 for Birdsong in the first half will turn the tide. The bad news is that the snap is horrible, and it's basically a ground ball to the shortstop. The good news, though, is that Birdsong is able to field it and actually get something decent off, getting off a 40-yard punt, which was his longest punt of the day to this point. The average has gone down once again, as we're now looking at 43.73 yards per punt, with the average dipping over half a yard since the start of the game. But considering how good that punt was after the horrible snap, and with a Washington rush coming right into him as a result, things might be starting to change. They really might be. He just needs a few more chances to boost that average. And with the way the Cards' offense have been playing thus far, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, he'll get some more chances. Oh, you better believe it. On drive number 7, the good news for the Cardinals is that finally, after nearly half an hour, they got a first down. They actually did it. The bad news is that upon getting this first down, they proceeded to do absolutely nothing, and Carl Birdsong was sent out to punt for the 6th time today. Although this time, it's at midfield. This is the cruel irony of being a punter. If you punt the ball 50 yards here, we can all agree that it's a bad punt. If you punt the ball out of the end zone for a touchback, and Washington starts the drive at their own 20-yard line, you didn't do your job properly. However, if you boom a 50-yard punt here for a touchback, that increases your yards per punt average and helps you get closer to that $5,000 bonus. This punt goes 38 yards and is fair caught at the 12-yard line, which lowers the average for Birdsong, unfortunately, but is a good punt all things considered. The better the punt for the team, the worse the punt for Birdsong's wallet, as now, the yards per punt average on the season is 43.62. A lot of work to do, but remember, we're still in the first half. All these punts are still in the first half. That's how bad the Cards' offense was. And the Cardinals, well, like I said, they look like crap offensively. Carl Birdsong is going to have plenty more chances to boom a few and try and earn that $5,000. And after drive 8 ends in interception, and drive 9 ends with the Cardinals going 3 and out and with Neil Lomax taking a sack on the 12-yard line, Carl Birdsong is on for the 7th time this half. When your punter is on the field 7 times in one half, you are clearly doing something wrong. Having said that, with Birdsong backed up at the 12, he lets off what is, by far, his best punt of the day, getting a lot of hang time and a fair amount of distance, with the punt being fielded at Washington's 43-yard line. It's a 45-yard punt, and for the first time all game, Birdsong has a punt that went over his 44-yard average at the start of the game. This is going to help. This is going to help a lot, as we've gone from 43.62 to 43.65. We're stopping the bleeding momentarily. Even though it took about a quarter, it feels as though Carl Birdsong is starting to find his rhythm, and is starting to flip the field and show why, at least on this day, he is St. Louis's most valuable offensive weapon. At halftime, Washington leads 14-0, and based on our eyes, we can clearly see that St. Louis is not going to win this game without a minor miracle, and will have to go on the road in the first round of the playoffs. But the drama is still there. There's still $5,000 to be made. There's still a bonus that needs to be earned, and by God, Carl Birdsong, with the help of the ineptitude of the Cardinals' offense, is going to try and do everything in his power to get his money. Shocker, the Cardinals start off their first drive of the second half by going 3 and out, as Neil Lomax tries a deep shot on third down that falls well off the mark. Time for Carl Birdsong to get back out there, and time for his leg to get another workout in. Punting from his own 17-yard line, this is a good punt, and it goes all the way to Washington's 36. Call it a 47-yard punt, well above his average entering this game. He's tied his season high for punts in a game this year, and he did it with his best punt of the season. That's now back-to-back punts where he's raised his average, and just like that, the 44-yard bonus is back in contention, as we're back up to 43.71 yards per punt. All we gotta do is get to 44 yards and we're good. And if he keeps punting like this and getting some opportunities to punt the ball away, he might get it. And then, the worst thing happens. The Cardinals have back-to-back drives where he does not see the field. Back-to-back drives without Birdsong. On the ensuing drive, Neil Lomax throws an interception, so that's one less opportunity for Birdsong to raise his average. And on the drive after that, the Cardinals actually get down to the goal line and proceed to turn it over, killing a ton of time off the clock in the process, once again, giving Birdsong one less chance to raise his average. And after Washington goes on a 99-yard touchdown drive to make it 28-0, officially putting the game on ice and killing a ton of time off the clock in the process, we're now getting into extremely dicey territory. Is Carl Birdsong going to have another opportunity to raise his average? Is Carl Birdsong going to have another chance to get his bonus? The Cards' offense and the Cards' defense didn't help him out in the slightest bit during that third quarter and the start of the fourth. But maybe things will be different on this next drive. It's 3rd and 14, so, alright, we're in a pretty good spot. Based on history, the Cards ain't converting this. Neil Lomax drives back to pass, and he's pressured. Alright, that's good. The offensive line is crumbling again. Birdsong is going to get a chance to... Oh, crap, he got the ball off and he's wide open. You've got to be kidding me. Willard Harrell is going to catch this ball and take it to the house, or at least past midfield, killing more time off the clock, and either not letting Birdsong see the field, or if he does see it, it'll be deep into Washington territory, where he won't have enough of the field to raise his average. This is awful. Willard Harrell just took one for his teammate there. You can't convince me of anything else. Willard Harrell knew that Carl Birdsong needed that $5,000 and intentionally dropped that pass so that Birdsong would get an opportunity. That's my conspiracy theory, and I'm sticking by it. Just like that, Carl Birdsong has new life. And man, does he take advantage of it as he booms a 55-yard punt. Not only is that going to raise his average, making it 3 straight punts for Birdsong above that 44-yard mark, but he's going to raise his average by a lot, as this was his first punt of 50-plus yards. We've got about 10 minutes left, and Birdsong's season total is 53 punts for 2,328 yards. Do the math on that, and that's 43.92. We are so close to that mark. We can see it. It's a realistic possibility at this point. It really is. Carl Birdsong just needs one more punt, and he's going to get his bonus. Carl Birdsong is finding his groove. Carl Birdsong is finding his rhythm and his form in the second half. One more opportunity, and he's going to do it. I can just feel it. With the way Birdsong is playing, and with the way the Cards offense is playing, there's only one realistic thing that can't happen here. There's only one thing that would be disastrous, and that is if the Cards drove deep enough down the field where there was no conceivable chance for Birdsong to raise the average. A punt from his own territory? He was going to do it. I have no doubt he's going to do it. A punt from deep in Washington territory? Well, that would be mathematically impossible. With that in mind, the Cardinals get it back with about 9 minutes to go in the contest at their own 30-yard line, still trailing 28-0. First down, and Neil Lomax tries to hit his tight end, Greg LaFleur. LaFleur drops it. Good teammate. He knows what's up. All right, we're fine. Second down, and Lomax goes on an out route for Mike Schumann. And, oh, crap. That's a first down. He got both feet in. Okay, not ideal for Birdsong's sake, but we're still in St. Louis territory at the 40-yard line. You can still punt it a pretty long distance if you wanted to. Just don't get into Washington territory. That's all we need. Do not get into Washington territory. Lomax rolls out on the next play. And no, Roy Green, you cannot catch that ball. You cannot catch that ball. You just can't do that. First down in Washington territory, just past midfield. Okay, you know what? Not ideal, but at the 50-yard line, you can still boot it 50 yards and raise the average. If Birdsong is only going to get one more chance this entire game, with how rounding works, he just needs a 46-yard punt. So as long as the Cardinals don't get any more yardage here, it's possible. It's 100% possible for Birdsong to get his $5,000. I just need Neil Lomax to play like he did the first 3 quarters of the contest, and we've still got a chance. Well, crap. So you wait until midway through the 4th quarter down 28-0 to make a good throw, huh? Puts the ball at Washington's 20. It's over. It's over. Birdsong isn't going to punt the ball again. Obviously, there's no scenario where you're punting inside an opponent's 20-yard line. Birdsong will not get a chance at his 10th punt. He's not going to get a chance to boot one away. Unless the Cardinals display some offensive incompetence of the highest order and move significantly backward, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
He got as far as the 1. They fumble. The blitz is on. Lomax rolls away and he's sacked. Mark Murphy came roaring in.
Is that hope I feel? Just when I went out, did they pull me right back in? That's a loss of 7 yards. Now, we need a few more of those, but okay. That's something. It's a start. Wish that came earlier on the drive, but beggars can't be choosers at this point. It's something. I don't think just getting sacked 3 times is going to be enough, though. We'll need a pre-snap penalty or two to really push them back even more.
We'll be leading this game in order to bring you coverage of your home team's game. Whistle stops play.
Holy crap, this might be happening. Hang on a second, people. Hang on a second. The Cardinals have second and a mile and have gone backward 12 yards. We're not there yet, but it's possible. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. You've got to be kidding me. They forgot how to play offense again. The Cardinals forgot how to play offense. They know one direction, and it's backwards, which is good for Carl Birdsong. From inside the red zone, they're now at the 38-yard line. If Neil Lomax can just take one more sack here, Carl Birdsong is going to have the chance to make a cool $5,000 with a touchback out of the back of the end zone. Come on, Neil. You've been poor all game. We're rooting for you. Just be poor one more time. One more time. Help a teammate out. Take one final sack. Pull up Brett Favre or Michael Strahan. You can do it. We're all counting on you. Down 28-0 with the Cardinals facing third and a mile. This is, to those who know the situation at hand, the biggest play of the game. Please take a sack. Please just take a sack here, Neil. Please take a sack.
Will they come again? And the pass to Green. Incomplete.
Heartbreaking. Just heartbreaking. There's no other way to say it. Heartbreaking. The Cardinals do the worst thing imaginable. The one thing that couldn't have happened ended up happening. The Cards go on a long drive, but it stalls in Washington territory where Birdsong has to punt it away. And even if he punts at the maximum distance, he has no chance at raising his average. He needs a 46-yard punt to get the $5,000 bonus. And even if he boots this one all the way to Baltimore, it's only going to count as 38 yards. It would not be enough. With that, the saddest, most heartbreaking touchback occurs, which was his first touchback since the strike ended. So his first in 40 punts. I was not kidding. Carl Birdsong was really good. His 10th punt of the game, and it's a touchback. 54 punts on the season. 2,365 yards combined. 43.8 yards per punt. He would not get an 11th chance to punt it away. He would not get his $5,000. Carl Birdsong wouldn't just leave the nation's capital as a member of the losing team. He would also leave the nation's capital $5,000 poorer. I want to put into some perspective just how close Carl Birdsong was to getting that 5K had that entire game just not been the crappiest of circumstances imaginable. Keeping in mind that this 44 yards per punt bonus was clearly designed by the Bidwills in the contract to be a completely unattainable goal, considering everything that we talked about earlier. If Birdsong had just 9 more yards on his 54 punts, he would have gotten it. It would have been 43.96 yards, which would have been rounded up to 44, since the NFL only goes to the 10th of a yard and not 100th. Obviously, the final punt for Birdsong couldn't have gone any further than it did. He only had 37 yards to work with. But if Birdsong got just 1 more yard on each of his 9 punts during that finale against Washington, he would have had it. Just 1 measly yard, and he would have gotten his mark. Over the course of an entire season, he needed 9 yards on 54 punts. If his punts averaged just 0.16 yards more, or 6 inches, he would have gotten it. Think of how small 6 inches is. If you're watching this on a laptop, that laptop is probably somewhere around 13 inches. Cut it in half. Obviously, don't do that. Literally, don't do that. But that's the distance you're looking at. If Birdsong could just average 1/2 of your laptop more per punt, if he could have gotten just one more bounce, if he could have gotten just one more favorable measurement, he would have been $5,000 richer. Instead, while he ended the season as the NFC leader in yards per punt, he didn't end it with a stack of cash to go alongside. And if you're wondering to yourself, come on, just come on with all of this. There is no way that Carl Birdsong knew about this in real time and was doing the mental math in his head and had any idea that any of this was taking place. You'd be wrong. You'd be dead wrong. Don't mess with people's money. Because after the game, when Birdsong found out his stats and realized that he didn't get his bonus that he was in line for, he had the reaction that you would expect. As Birdsong said, it's just one of those things. I didn't have the day I wanted to have. I don't know whether it was because I knew I was in the position I was in and had the chance at getting the bonus. I think I basically went out and tried to kick the ball too hard. Translation? He knew. He clearly knew. He knew he didn't get it. It's like if a golfer is out there playing great golf, and all of a sudden, because of what's happening in the field around him, he's in first place. He knows. You can bet that he knows, and he might do things differently, and he might get in his head. And in that first half, Carl Birdsong definitely got in his own head. By his own admission, that's exactly what happened. The sad irony in what happened to this man right here is that the Cardinals lost their playoff game the following week against the Green Bay Packers up at Lambeau Field, losing that one by a final score of 41-16 in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And despite the fact that the Cards didn't look good on offense in that one, even trailing 41-9 at one point in the fourth quarter, Carl Birdsong in that game punted a grand total of 0 times. Every drive either ended in a failed fourth down conversion, a score, or a turnover. If the games were reversed, and Birdsong punted 10 times against Green Bay, but 0 times against Washington, because stats are only measured for the regular season, Carl Birdsong would have gotten his $5,000. Literally, everything had to go wrong for Birdsong to not get his bonus. And somehow, it did. It just did. The final game of the 1983 season was Murphy's Law in action, and you cannot convince me otherwise. However, sometimes, when a player gets awfully close to a bonus but doesn't get it, the owner will throw them a bone. The owner will recognize that this was harsh, that this was unfair, and that the player came close enough where they should be rewarded for their efforts. No, Carl Birdsong didn't get 44 yards per punt, but that was such an unattainable goal that I'm genuinely shocked he made it close. To miss it by about 6 inches per punt? To lead the NFC and miss by just 1 or 2 bounces? Yeah, let's give him the $5,000. Especially because he's not making a lot of money anyways, compared to other NFL players. And with that, owner Bill Bidwell performed an incredible act of generosity. His heart grew 3 sizes that day. Because despite Carl Birdsong coming up just short, Bill Bidwell had it in his heart to give him $5,000. The $5,000 didn't mean a lot to Bidwell, who was pretty rich, but it meant a lot to Birdsong. It truly was a happy ending to this chaotic story, and a reminder of the fact that there is good in the world, and there is kindness if you know where to look for. I'm just kidding, it's freaking Bill Bidwell! It's freaking Bill Bidwell! Of course he didn't give him the $5,000! Birdsong was completely screwed! The Bidwells are some of the worst owners in NFL history. The Bidwells are notoriously cheap. They always have been, and they always will be. You really think that Bill Bidwell gave someone $5,000 when he did not have to? Especially when the owners lost a lot of money during the strike, and especially when it's not like Birdsong could leave the team in free agency if he was upset, since free agency did not exist back then? Of course not! Birdsong knew that he had to hit that mark to get his bonus, because God knows if it wasn't in his contract, that he wasn't getting it from freaking Bill Bidwell of all people. Carl Birdsong was out $5,000. Bottom line, Birdsong, despite leading the NFC, and despite being the all-time leader in a single season in franchise history in yards per punt at the time, was out a good chunk of change. And that's especially true, and especially heartbreaking, when you realize that he should have had a 44-yard average, and he would have had it if not for the stupidity of his teammates. Let's go back to Week 2 of the 1982 season, when the St. Louis Cardinals played the Dallas Cowboys in the final game before the strike halted play for 2 months. In the second quarter, Carl Birdsong lined up for the punt at his own 38-yard line, and it's an absolute beauty. It takes a great bounce. It goes past both Dallas return men, and it goes out of bounds at the 2-yard line. You can't do it any better than that. You just can't. That's a 60-yard punt to pin the Cowboys by their goal line, and that's going to increase the average a ton. However, the punt didn't count, because the referees ruled that the Cardinals had an eligible receiver down the field. Earl Farrell, number 31 of the Cardinals, who was a rookie at the time but would go on to have a very successful career in the league with the team, playing with the Cards until 1989, was called for the penalty. Not his finest moment as a Cardinal. So wipe the punt off the board and do it over. The ensuing punt was this punt right here, which went for 45 yards. Just like that, Carl Birdsong lost 15 yards. Because of his own teammates' stupidity in being an ineligible man downfield, what should have been a 60-yard punt turned out to be, on the redo, a 45-yard punt. And if that 60-yard punt counted and Earl Farrell did his job properly, then Carl Birdsong's stats would have been 54 punts for 2,380 yards, or 44.07 yards per punt, which would have given him his $5,000 bonus. Life isn't fair sometimes. Life just isn't fair. Carl Birdsong earned that bonus. There is no doubt in my mind that he earned that bonus. If ever there was a time that a player deserved a bonus even when they didn't hit a milestone, if ever that time existed, it was with Carl Birdsong in 1982. My man got screwed. He just did. Carl Birdsong would play 3 more seasons in the NFL, and the following year, in 1983, he would improve his net yards per punt average, going from 36.2 yards to 36.3 yards, as he got more hang time on his balls. His 1983 performance was so good that he was named to the Pro Bowl as the representative punter for the NFC, so he probably got a good chunk of change for that at least. Granted, the Cardinals were so bad in 1983 to start off the season, starting the year off with a 1-5 record, that Birdsong had to punt the ball 85 times that year, or well over 5 times per game. So people who watched the Cardinals that season became very well acquainted with Birdsong. But after back-to-back lackluster seasons from a net yardage standpoint, and a really bad 1986 preseason, where according to head coach Gene Stallings, 3 of his 5 kicks were not acceptable, Carl Birdsong was released, and would never play another down in professional football again. In 1982, he almost made history. In 1983, he was a Pro Bowler. In 1986, he was out of the NFL for good. Considering how short his career was, and considering how little money he made due to his position, his undrafted status, and the cheapness of the ownership at hand, that $5,000 would have gone a long way, especially back in 1982. Instead, it was not meant to be, by just a couple of inches. Where is the Gene Steratore index card when you need it? The Carl Birdsong story is one of the craziest, and maybe one of the saddest examples of a bonus in a contract gone wrong. The Cardinals put in, let's call it for what it is, an incentive that seemed completely unattainable. The man in question is on pace to hit it going into the final week, and then loses at the end because of the crappiest circumstances imaginable. And even then, he only lost it by a couple of inches per punt. Basically nothing. Today, I know it might be tough to feel bad for NFL players when they lose money, but with this man right here in 1982, considering how little he made and considering the strike, you can't help but feel bad for him. Yes, the letter of the contract clause says that he didn't hit the bonus and meet what he needed to meet, but the spirit of it says that he absolutely did, and he deserved better. Carl Birdsong, simply put, deserved better. Because when it came to that 1982 regular season finale against Washington, from both a team perspective and a monetary perspective, this was definitely not the song that Carl Birdsong wanted to sing.